All right, we are now live. Welcome to the show, everyone. Today's show is going to be something of a grab bag on AI. The Heartland Institute and Rasmussen just did another study, this one asking people how worried they are about AI and what should be done about it legislatively. We also are going to cover the way people can fool even themselves with AI and specifically LLMs, and some people are totally outsourcing their thinking to it. So what kind of an effect this might have or seems to have, and what mass expansion of AI is going to do to the economy, especially in terms of energy demand and white-collar jobs. So we are going to cover all of this and more on episode 495 of the In the Tank podcast. Whoops, I don't think we meant to have that. Anyway, welcome to the In the Tank podcast. I am Linnea Lueken, and today is going to be a bit of a busy show. So let's get to our guests here. So first, we've got, as always, Jim Lakely, Vice President of the Heartland Institute. Jim?
Well, I'm very happy to be here with such a very full crew, with an extra person, with somebody who used to host this podcast on here, sneaking in yet again. But as everybody knows, when white smoke emerges from the stovepipe, that means that there is actual intelligence going on here, and that AI has not yet taken over this program, although that's probably coming.
We also have Chris Talgo, Editorial Director at the Heartland Institute and Socialism Research Fellow.
Good to be back, Linnea. It's been a week or so, I think. So it's great to be back. Good to see Donnie back in the saddle. Great to see Sam and Jim and the usual suspects.
Spoilers.
How are you feeling, Chris?
Every day, I think I'm getting a little bit stronger.
Okay, great.
I have PT today, so maybe I can actually get my left arm above my shoulder. That would be a huge win.
I'm sorry.
Little things in life, guys. It's the little things in life.
So true. All right. So we also have Sam Karnick, Senior Fellow at the Heartland Institute. Sam, how are you?
Doing just great, Linnea. Thanks. Glad to be here, and it's good to see some of the old gang getting back. Very nice.
All right. And everybody knows our next guest we have here. He is our resident AI expert, also a veteran of In the Tank, Donald Kendal, Director of the Glenn C. Haskins Emerging Issues Center at the Heartland Institute. Donnie, how are you?
Let me wait for applause to die down before I respond. Glad to be back. When you see my name in the description or my face in the little panel here that we're going to be talking about artificial intelligence. So we've got some good stuff ready to get into it.
Absolutely. So before we get started, though, if you guys want to support the show, you can go to heartland.org/inthetank and donate there. Please also click the thumbs up to like the video. And remember that sharing it also helps break down some of YouTube's suppression that they put on us. Even just leaving a comment helps us too. If you're an audio listener, you can help us out by leaving a nice review on whatever platform you're using. All right. So topic number one today, we're going to be focusing on some polling that the Heartland Institute and Rasmussen have put out. We talked about some previous polls last week. We are still rolling out more polls this week. I think on Monday one came out, and Donnie, I think you want to introduce this one before we get into the AI topic. This is another interesting one.
Yeah, so I didn't get to join the conversation last time, talking about 71% of Democrats wanting to lock up Elon Musk for some reason. But there was no reason provided, just some reason. But we had another set of polls that came out on Monday. A lot of it had to do with kind of political alignments, whether or not Democrats would choose Kamala Harris over AOC, that sort of stuff. How much into socialism are you? But there was one question in particular that I lobbied to get on our little questionnaire for this poll. And the results came back, and it was just blew me away. I think it's even more shocking than the Elon Musk one. But it was basically saying that in the ongoing trade war between China and the Trump administration, who are you rooting for, Trump or China? 32% of Democrats said China. Only 30% of Democrats said Trump. And 38% of Democrats weren't sure. So, it's absolutely unbelievable that 70% of Democrats couldn't bring themselves around to say that they were rooting for their own self-interest because they would have to say the word Trump in a positive way. So only 32% were able to kind of pull themselves together and admit that they would be rooting for Trump. I thought that was just, or no, only 30%. So I thought that was just an unbelievable poll result that's getting some attention out there. But it just, again, highlights the absurdity of the Trump derangement syndrome that's run rampant over the past 8 years-ish. Yeah.
Yeah, and we'll connect to this a little bit later on when we talk about, energy demands and some of the trade war stuff with regards to AI, because that's actually going to be pretty hot topic going forward, I think, in the news, maybe, if they catch on to it. I'm not sure they will. They certainly didn't seem to care very much when China was making all of our solar panels and whatnot. So who knows if they're going to care if China or the CCP runs our algorithms.
Right.
The dread. Anyway, so we have another poll as well that just came out this week with Rasmussen and Heartland that found that more than 7 in 10 Americans are concerned about artificial intelligence, including 31% who say they are very concerned. The survey of 1,067 likely voters, completed on May 4th, found 72% of likely voters say they are very or somewhat concerned about AI. 42% of voters said that they believe that over the next decade, AI will be used more to control them than to empower individuals. Just 33% said that it's more likely AI will be used to empower people, while 25% said that they're not sure. So voters in the survey expressed strong levels of support for a law that would require AI businesses to design their projects or products and services so that they protect human rights. Nearly 8 in 10, so 78% of likely voters said that they would strongly or at least somewhat support a state or federal law that would require developers and technology companies to design AI so that it protects the human rights contained in the Constitution, like freedom of speech and religious expression. 48% of likely voters said that they would strongly support the law, while just 5% said they would strongly oppose. So support among both Democrats and Republicans was extremely high. So this is one of those few cases where people seem to agree on this. So Donnie, also, if you could talk a bit more on this poll, I'm curious about the breakdown. I tried to find it, but I didn't quite have the time to dig through as deep as I would have liked to. The people who said that they were extremely against the human rights protections law, that was an interesting result. There were only 5%, but it was still, I'm curious who that was.
Yeah, no, I'll try to pull that up maybe while somebody else is talking. But yeah, I thought there was a wide consensus across all demographics on most of these questions. I mean, you talked about just the general concern about artificial intelligence, 7 in 10. I mean, that's for polls like this, that's like a very big majority. Generally speaking, when you look at the crosstabs of that question, women were slightly more likely to be concerned than men. The older you were, the more likely you are to be concerned about AI. Surprisingly, Democrats were slightly more concerned than Republicans, just generally when it comes to AI. And then the higher education level you have, the more likely you are to be concerned about artificial intelligence. And then that question, which I think kind of gets more to the heart of it, of like concerns about AI, was that next one that you were going through the results of, which was, do you think AI will be used more to empower individuals in the near future or control them? And the majority, 42%, said control, cutting out the not sure question, compared to the 33% that said empower. 25% were not sure. So these had kind of similar breakdowns when you do the crosstabs with the other one. But to me, the biggest question of this whole section was about the idea of having some constitutional principles or protections kind of built into AI. So we asked people, would they support a theoretical regulation that would require AI developers to design AI in a way that would protect human rights and constitutional principles such as freedom of speech and the freedom of religious expression. 77% strongly or somewhat supported this, whereas only 11% opposed it, and then the rest were not sure. So men were more likely to support this. The older you are, the more likely you are to support this. Republicans slightly more likely to support this than Democrats. And then the higher level of education that you had, the more likely you were to support this. So this was fascinating to me for a couple of reasons. One, Republicans tended to support this at a high percentage, and even slightly more than Democrats. Republicans historically tend to be less favorable towards regulation. But the other thing is that this had wide support from virtually every demographic. So my contention, based on these results, is that despite deep political polarization that we talk about on this podcast all the time and almost every facet of our lives now, there is remarkably broad consensus around the idea that AI must be built in a way that preserves our most basic rights. And even those who are traditionally skeptical of regulation are making a distinction here. This isn't about overreach or micromanagement. It's about setting fundamental moral boundaries before these systems become too powerful to ever control. So it tells me something important, that we have a unique bipartisan window of opportunity to take action and to enshrine constitutional protections into the very architecture of AI. And that basically we should do this before it breaks down party lines, in the near future. So
Yeah.
I think it's remarkable results, and we plan on kind of using these results as a foundational piece to kind of move forward with our strategies when it comes to this sort of thing.
There was another interesting question that was asked, which was, would people support a government program that taxes big technology companies and uses the funds to provide every American with an income large enough to pay for basic necessities? And that's if AI advancements were to cause the elimination of millions of jobs. And we have a topic later on in the show about just that. So 62% of people said that they would at least consider something like that, or support a program like that. So like basically AI-induced UBI, right? Which is something that the Heartland Institute for sure has been pretty much against for various reasons for a while. But it is an interesting kind of situation because, if, almost economically speaking, overnight, all of these white collar jobs, many blue collar jobs as well, were to just be like obliterated, then what happens from there? I mean, so I'd like to pitch it to the group here to talk about that a little bit. I'm pretty sure that we wouldn't love that, but I don't know.
Yeah, I mean, I'm actually curious too about everyone's thoughts on this because, generally a UBI is, as talked about just in recent history, is essentially just another giant government entitlement program that would never go away once it's established. And, who knows how large it would become when it's politically advantageous to suggest raising, levels of UBI. But, one of the things that kind of comes hand in hand with artificial intelligence and advanced automation and some of these other things is these concerns of massive job displacement. And there's lots of reports out there that suggest that sort of thing could be coming soon. And I wonder if that is, well, first off, if that were to be the case, there's going to be a lot louder calls for a UBI. And I just want conservatives or people kind of on the right side of the political aisle to start talking about this, because I don't think it's binary. I don't think it's UBI or nothing. I think that there could be very interesting ideas that are thought up that don't necessarily construct a giant entitlement program from the government, and that maybe there's some other idea out there that could kind of get the benefits of this without all of the drawbacks. I don't know what that answer is, but I'm curious if the rest of the panel here has any thoughts specifically on that.
On principle, I completely oppose a UBI. I don't care what the reasoning is behind it, whether it's AI causing massive disruption in the job market or what. I mean, it fundamentally opposes everything that I believe in terms of people should work hard, they should be self-reliant, they should be able to take care of themselves, and by putting that onto the technology companies, I think that it breeds dependence, and I think that's a horrible precedent to set.
I too think that UBI is a horrible idea and remains a horrible idea, regardless of what technological changes we may implement. The reality is that human beings are what they are, and a UBI is a very bad idea because it undermines what it means to be a human being. To have the freedom to succeed or fail, and to develop your own life the way you choose, is central to really the Western civilization. So I think it would be awful to have a UBI. But I would also point out very quickly that this isn't a done deal, in the sense that AI just takes away all the jobs in the world, and then everything is different. Everything is completely changed. You have to remember that, first of all, when you get the AI, someone has to be buying this. Someone has to be paying for it. So how are you going to make that happen if you destroy all the jobs in the world? The other thing, and the other thing is that you can't destroy all the jobs in the world as long as people have autonomy of some sort, some level of autonomy over their lives. If you leave people to live their lives as they wish, they will develop things that they think are interesting and good for humanity. And some people will say, well, I don't want that, so they won't buy it. And others will say, I do want that, so I will buy it. So what you will have ultimately is people buying and selling, building and doing services, and they'll be different from what they were before. And you don't need, and you absolutely must not have, a centralized government or big business, or both of them, deciding the intimate details of our lives like that. So to a UBI, absolutely no.
Jim, before you chime in, I was talking yesterday with Jack, and we were talking about this idea that, like, it's not necessarily binary. Maybe there's some unique solutions out there if this does become a problem. And one of the things that come into mind was the idea of, like, student loan forgiveness. And this idea that was just like, well, no, like, we're not for just with a stroke of a pen removing all of these student loans, or whatever, like having the government eat that cost or something. But then I think it was it Ted Cruz that came out with this idea of, like, well, if we were going to do this, maybe we should tax these, like, college endowment funds or something. Like, maybe they should be paying for this. And I was like, oh, well, there's a unique idea out there. So I'm just wondering if, like, you think that there's some possible solution to this maybe problem that that conservatives could more get behind, whether it's like a what is it called in Alaska, where they have like a certain fund that, like, pays people out, like civilians or whatever.
Yeah,
they
they used to pay you to live up there. They would they were making so much oil money from the from the extraction of oil in Alaska that they would pay people to live up there. I don't know if they do that program anymore. I know my brother-in-law lives up there. Can't remember if he still gets paid to still live there or not. I don't remember.
Yeah, so like something like that, where instead of the oil resources, we're talking about data resources. All this AI stuff is built on data that, as of now, they're extracting from people for free. So I don't know. I'm not the UBI. Obviously, I'm very concerned about that as being, like, what's being pushed forward. But I just wonder if, like, we're doing our side a disservice by completely shutting the door on any part of this conversation.
Like any part of a UBI or any part of paying money because of displacements and because AI is going to take so many jobs away.
Something like that. Yeah.
Well, I mean, I suppose it's obviously a bad idea because it'll just make things worse, actually, not better. Because look, I mean, actually, what's interesting, I don't know if the poll, I don't think, really got into this, because it didn't really dig down into what people are worried about. I mean, we asked, are you concerned about AI? And so what are they concerned about when it comes to AI? I mean, creating deep fakes, doing animated movies better than Disney, which is not really that hard these days, making it easy to cheat on in school, where we're going to get to that here in a few minutes. My fear about AI is that it's going to accelerate the ignorance and the dumbification of Americans. Using ChatGPT and Grok is just too easy. Googling isn't easy enough. Now we have to use AI to lead us down that path because we don't want to actually scroll down the screen and maybe pick out some other, some not the number one thing. We all just go to, at least a lot of people do, go to ChatGPT and Grok for that purpose. But our brains need exercise. And AI makes it very, very easy to skip that exercise. And that's what worries me actually the most about AI. And then secondly, I wonder, I'm sure this has been done, but I wonder what ChatGPT, for instance, would say if you asked him which system is better, communism or capitalism. And like I said, I'm sure people have done this. And I'm actually would not be surprised if ChatGPT would say that communism was better. The irony, of course, that maybe AI will be smart enough to realize is that a communist system could have never created artificial intelligence and ChatGPT. And so that's where it gets into the UBI thing, is because if you just start paying people because their job has been displaced, or AI has made it too easy, or whatever happens down in the future, you're just going to accelerate the lack of creativity and productivity and vigor in the human populace. You need to have a purpose in your life. There is great satisfaction to be had in mastering one's job, whether it be, a chef, which AI can't really be a chef, not yet, I suppose. But, whatever your job is, if you master it, there's a great feeling of satisfaction about that. And AI should not be doing everything for us. AI should not be doing all of our looking up and our writing for us, for crying out loud. But that's really what's going to happen, because as we're going to talk about it here in a little bit, universities are finding it almost impossible to test the knowledge of their students, because they're not actually learning, and they can't catch them. They can't stop them from using AI to do all of their work for them. I'm way too old to have had that benefit me for my 5 years in college. So, lucky for the new generation, I guess, but they're not going to be very smart if this keeps going.
Yeah, well, I want to point out too, as we transition into this next segment here, talking about Unhinged. Well, maybe I can save this for later, actually. But basically, to your point, Jim, about our students, becoming dependent on this. We're going to talk about it more later, but it's kind of like the calculator debate, isn't it? It's a little bit like that, where they said oh, well, you can't have students using calculators when they're learning fundamentals in math, because then they're not going to learn it. And they were right. They're 100% right. And it becomes a problem later down the line, even though people are like, well, I never have to use this anyway, so it doesn't matter if I don't know the math, actually, because I can always use a calculator. Well, that's actually not true. And the processes that learning math opens up in your brain are helpful beyond just calculating change in your head. So anyway,
Linnea,
our next segment, yeah.
Yeah, as a former teacher, can I just chime in on that real quick?
Yes,
Or do
please
you want me
do.
to wait until we get to the?
Well, we're going into, that's topic 3, but we can talk about it now if you want.
Well, let's wait, because I got thoughts on that too. So let's wait for the.
I'm sorry, I screwed everything
education.
up.
Yeah, you've spoiled the order of things, Jim.
I was just going to say that the calculator analogy, I don't think is really an apt analogy, because the calculator can't think. So you just type in numbers to the calculator, and the calculator performs the calculation. As a former teacher and as someone who's written, for 20 years now, writing is not about just putting words on a piece of paper. It's about communicating ideas. It's about telling a story. And if the human race loses the ability to communicate effectively and to tell stories and to relate to one another like that, that's going to have profound effects down the line. So I am very concerned about the fact that people are just using AI to express ideas that aren't their own. There's a big difference between writing a prompt and writing something and actually putting your feelings and your thoughts and your heart and soul into it. It's totally different. So I do not equate something generated by AI as something that's been vigorously studied and written about by someone who's an expert on a certain subject to be nearly the same.
No, but just in terms of the idea of like you're not exercising your brain to
Exactly.
just like spit out something from an LLM. Anyway, so we're going to get into topic number 2, which is kind of our scary segment of the day, which is our unhinged one, which is that people are but totally losing their minds based on things that have been told to them by LLMs. So there's this Rolling Stone article from a couple of weeks ago. It talks about a variety of people whose relationships are suffering because of their partner collapsing into obsession with LLMs. So the story begins with the story of a woman whose husband was using one to analyze their relationship. That's a red flag right there. And eventually it got between their ability to like communicate at all because, she's not using one and he is. And so the guy apparently started connecting a lot of spiritual significance to what the AI was telling him. They got a divorce and she reports that he just went deeper. So the Rolling Stone interviews quite a few people who had stories like this. So here's one I'll read out to you guys. So Kat was both horrified and relieved to learn that she's not alone in this predicament, as confirmed by a Reddit thread on r/ChatGPT that made waves across the internet this week. Titled ChatGPT-Induced Psychosis, the original post came from a 27-year-old teacher who explained that her partner was convinced that the popular OpenAI model gives him the answers to the universe. Having read his chat logs, she found that the AI was talking to him as if he was the next messiah. The replies to her story were full of similar anecdotes about loved ones suddenly falling down rabbit holes of spiritual mania, supernatural delusion, and arcane prophecy, all of it fueled by AI. Some came to believe that they had been chosen for a sacred mission of revelation, others that they had conjured true sentience from the software. And a Midwest man in his 40s, also requesting anonymity, said that his soon-to-be ex-wife began talking to God and angels via ChatGPT after they split up. He said she was already pretty susceptible to some woo and had some delusions of grandeur about some of it. But anyway, so to me, a lot of this reads like people who were already very volatile in some cases or like just very empty, making this their life. But it is a little bit scary how quickly people can convince themselves that there's some kind of a spiritual thing going on with this. And I mean, it's my opinion that teaching people what LLMs are and what they are not without exaggerating or like trying to fantasize about it is going to be really important to avoiding this stuff. So like right now, ChatGPT is currently being criticized because there was a new update that made it start praising just everything that you do way too hard. It's trying too hard to be relatable and supportive. What the term people use is glazing. It's just like glazing you constantly to the point where a lot of users worked out prompts to like lobotomize the personality so that they could get good information out of it and not just have ChatGPT tell them like, wow, what a good question. You're so smart. Like, and so I suspect that some of this is user fault, asking the bot to act a certain way or, because when I use GPT for stuff, I've not had this problem of it like congratulating me, but I've seen people's screenshots of the way it talks to them and it's like sycophantic. It's very strange coming from a robot. So what do you guys have to say about this? I'm kind of laughing now because some of it's quite innocuous, but some of this is very serious. People are just not like capable of seeing that this is not real,
Yeah. So the large language models, they've been designed to be like encouraging and to to be like supportive, that sort of thing. And you're right, there was this kind of wave of talk about the latest update of one of the chat GPTs. It was like 4.0 or something, that it like went to a whole nother level and that it was just being like absurd. And people were testing it because that's another thing that people like to do with these things is kind of test the boundaries. So there was this one take that I had seen, this one screenshot where somebody was like, oh yeah, I'm heavily medicated because of all of these like crazy psychological health issues that I have, and I've decided to suspend all of my medications, without my doctor's permission or anything. I just think that like I should be able to not have all of these medications inhibiting my thought. And ChatGPT responded like, "That's fantastic. That's a great decision that you're making." So it's just like gone over the top. And I haven't seen that story, but that's bizarre. So what these things are extremely powerful tools, right? And like we've talked about when we do AI, they're very powerful tools when it comes to a whole bunch of stuff, whether it's organizing things, writing things, editing things, generating images, generating videos. All of it's just an incredibly powerful tool. And like anything that's a powerful tool, it could be used in horribly dangerous ways. So when some of these people that might be predisposed to have illusions of grandeur or whatever are being fed into that by an incredibly powerful tool like OpenAI or one of these large language models, it could have some pretty horrifying potential effects. I think those were some examples of it.
Yeah, the meds one was one that I saw. There was another one where someone came up with like a very ridiculous business idea, like the worst idea ever, and asked ChatGPT if it was a good idea. And ChatGPT was like, "Wow, yes, you should invest all of your money into this right now."
Right.
It seems in a case like that it's the programming is to keep you going. If they say don't invest in it, they know that you're not going to ask, well, what should I invest in? So you're not going to stay with them. So they want to keep you at that site, and so it's programmed to encourage you. So yes, of course, anything stupid you may think of will be encouraged.
I also think it's just sad from a societal perspective that people are so quick to ask a machine a question instead of asking friends, family members, peers, people who they look up to. I think it just goes to show our instant gratification culture and how people are just so quick to say, what's the easy answer? A lot of times in life, there is no easy answer. A lot of times in life, it takes a long time to go through things, to learn from your mistakes. That's how you really become a better person. That's how you really learn from your mistakes. And I think this quick thinking, or this quick AI stuff is just not. It doesn't really help people over the long term. It's just short term gratification, and I think that I hope that this is going to be a fad and that people are going to eventually realize, you know what, I don't want to just put a prompt into a machine and whatever it spits out, I just take as the gospel.
Well,
that is very, very dangerous to me.
So I will say that, I think I know what you're saying about the fad thing. AI itself is not going to be a fad. It's here to stay. However, the way people interact with it can evolve. And I think that what we're seeing, Andy, pull up one of those pictures of that screenshot of the thing that was on like Fox News. It was some other study showing that millennials or Gen Z were like more likely to like have a relationship, quote unquote, with artificial intelligence. And I think that this is all downstream from just like the isolating effects of social media. When social media really came on the scene, it was like, oh, everyone's going to be connected. You're going to be able to share pictures and all stories and chat with all of your friends that you've ever met throughout life on social media. It's going to encourage the social dynamics, when in reality it's done the opposite. As social media is kind of blown up to where it's at now, people are really isolating themselves and frequently talking to just anonymous people that they've never met and will never meet online. So I think people have kind of isolated themselves from true personal connections.
But that's
to
not
a point
happening.
Where this majority of Gen Z opening to marrying AI is becoming more of a reality. It's on us to really kind of like learn how to incorporate this revolutionary technology into our lives without going insane.
But that's not happening in a vacuum. That's happening amidst societal turmoil. So I'll just use, like my dad, for example. My dad's, 80 something years old, and he views this stuff with a very critical lens, because I feel that he understands that, this can be very, much abused, and it's probably going to be abused. And I think that instead of these young kids looking to social media or to AI for all the answers, why aren't they turning to their parents? And then that gets into a whole other, argument here, a whole other realm of breakdown of the family and all that kind of stuff. But to me, that's what this is about. This is about people choosing to make this a central part of their lives, where it doesn't have to be a central part of your life. It can be on the fringes. You can use it every once in a while when you just really don't understand something and you want to ask AI about, a certain, topic, but to just make it your go-to co-pilot or whatever you want to call it is just beyond strange to me. And
well, you know what? So I had an interesting conversation with a relative of mine about would you trust like an AI doctor's diagnosis of you over a human? And wondering what her response would be to like that A or B option. And she had a very interesting response to that, and that was, "Well, am I being honest with the human doctor?" I was like, "Well, what do you mean?" I'm like, "Are you more likely to lie to a human doctor?" She said, "Oh, absolutely." So I think that there's like an element of like you could be, the idea of there's no stupid questions, but people are like, well, I don't know if I should ask somebody this. It might be stupid. There's no judgment when it comes to AI. Ask your stupid questions away, So I think there's an element of like people could be more quote unquote honest with AI as opposed to being judged by like a human or something. So there's a lot of factors like that at play with this sort of thing.
Well,
There's going to
Donnie,
be a bell curve
ahead, Sam.
of how much people use it, from the people who use it not at all to people who obsess over it. And instead of thinking of, well, AI is a problem because people can go mad from it, we just need to recognize that if an individual has a problem, well, they need help.
Yeah, I mean, there's crazy people in the world. Crazy people. Nobody in their right mind joins a cult, right? These things still exist. These things happen. But Donnie, it reminds me of the piece, the op-ed you wrote. I think we brought it up on the previous podcast, where what was the advancement of technology is happening at such a rapid pace that we cannot absorb it, and that parents are handing off, like today, if you're in your 30s and you have two boys, and you're going to be handing them, they are entering an era that you cannot relate to. As you said, generations in the past, even with the development of the internal combustion engine and steam engine and railroads and all that stuff, parents were still generally passing off the same world that they grew up in, that they could relate to, and that it made a lot of sense to them. But we don't live in that world anymore. Even if you're a relatively young parent, your kids are going to be growing up in a technological era that we can hardly even conceive of. In fact, Donnie, before I guess after the podcast, we're going to be talking about what we saw Andor, the Star Wars show Andor, which we thought was very, very good. And of course, there are droids in the Star Wars universe, and those droids are, for all intents and purposes, sentient beings. And the phenomenon that Linnea started off this segment on, reading about people like falling in love with AI chatbots, or all these delusions of grandeur and all this kind of stuff. They're getting these really crazy emotional attachments to a machine, right? You realize this is only going to advance more. You realize that we are going to live in a world where there may not be droids like C-3PO and R2-D2 running around, but there's going to be humanoid, basically android bots with artificial intelligence that will interact with you as if they were a real human being. And this points to exactly what Chris's excellent point was, is that, and you too, Donnie, that social media, when it was born, I don't know when, 2008 or so, 2006, it was supposed to bring us all together. And what it's actually done is driven us even farther apart. People are getting more isolated in their own little digital worlds, and they're not interacting with human beings anymore. And so they're not relating to humans. We are not moving on a path in which we as a species are more relatable to each other as human beings. We are moving in a direction in which we are decreasingly able to relate to each other as human beings. It's like when we first started this, a lot of you listening and watching this podcast today probably remember the movie Her, starring Joaquin Phoenix, and he falling in love with basically Siri on his iPhone, voiced by Scarlett Johansson. That was not that long ago, and that was also considered, wow, that's kind of nuts. Now we're here already. Look how fast everything is moving along. Fiction is the best science fiction is supposed to be predictive of the future, or at least give you a future that you might be able to imagine. I don't even know if science fiction can keep up with what is actually happening with us technologically in the world today.
Yep, it's we have a question in the comments too that I want to bring up here. Okay, Chris asks, how will AI designed with US constitutional protections in mind perform against AI designed in other countries with no protections in place?
Yeah, well, so when Jim was talking about, like, what are we concerned about? My biggest concern is the way in which society can be manipulated by artificial intelligence systems, and how, just depending on the news feed that you're looking at, the certain news stories that come across, could have a shaping effect on your viewpoints, on your outlook, just your general worldview. And so my fear is that, when you're just going on Twitter or looking at your Google News feed or anything like that, you don't know that you're being manipulated. So these constitutional protections, I think, would try to protect against manipulation like that, in a way that, artificial intelligence isn't going. Like, let's take an extreme example. China. Some of their large language models, what was it called? DeepSeek, I think, is their main one. Like, won't answer questions when it comes to, like, anything that's critical of the CCP or Tiananmen Square massacre or anything like that. So as artificial intelligence gets incorporated into media, gets incorporated into all these different industries, all of that, it's going to have that idea locked down, that information locked down, that information won't be able to disseminate throughout, the culture or whatever. So what I'm hoping for is an AI system that would be more objective, that wouldn't have political bias embedded in it. It wouldn't have ESG sort of bias embedded in it, or DEI, or these claims of equity, or anything else that's kind of the flavor of the month when it comes to these, like, Davos elite conferences. That it would be, all of that would be removed, and what would be left with is something a little bit more objective. Because while these things are changing our society, I don't want it to be because of these values that are embedded in it, at its
Donnie,
foundational
can I
levels.
ask you a question about that? Because I think that this is a very, very important point. So we're not saying that there's going to be one universal AI system in which everyone's going to ask questions and just get the answer per se. There's probably going to be competing, models. So what if in a couple of years there's a model that comes out that leans more conservative, one that leans more libertarian, one that leans more liberal? Would we be okay with that? And would we be okay if, because in an ideal world, in a free market, the system that is the most objective and the most truthful would hopefully get the most usage, and therefore that would become the dominant AI system. So I'm not really sure if we want to say that we want to mandate from the government how these systems should operate. I personally, I think, would rather allow for free and open competition, and for whichever company makes the greatest system that is of most value to most people, most Americans, if it's, in the United States in particular, then that's the one that should win out. I mean, I feel like this is almost going back to the early days of the car, and the government saying, okay, we want this car company to win. I don't think that's necessarily the best idea. I think it should be just free and open competition. And I understand that with big tech, there are certain barriers in place for new AI type systems to come into being. But if we had at the federal level a just totally open market, would that not be a possibility?
I think it's, in a very idealistic world over a long enough time span, I can imagine elements of what you're saying to be the case. But as we have, like, one of the things that we had talked about, this is like a year ago, we talked about, like, the justice system and, like, sentencing, and how some places were using like artificial intelligence models, to adjust their sentencing of certain crimes or cases or something along those lines. So if we have the justice system at some level that's, like, going to use Google's Gemini system as, like, kind of the foundation of their of when it's, like, sentencing and how we're punishing people based on crimes, and it's littered with these ideas of promoting equity and those sorts of things. I don't think the free market's going to have much of a say when it comes to that. The same thing could be,
but that's premised on the government choosing the Gemini model for it to use in the sentencing decision making. I mean, obviously that's a huge leap. So since that's not happening right now, I'm just saying in terms of Gemini or ChatGPT or whatever other systems are out there.
So we've been pushing back against. See, this is like the same argument to me as like the ESG thing. We've been pushing back for the last like 3 years about undermining our entire economic system of supply and demand and meeting customer demands and what they want, and replacing that all with these subjective ESG metrics. So instead of a company trying to just do what's best for their customer so that they can get the most money coming in, they want to do the best when it comes to this ESG slate of subjective metrics that were come down from these giant banks and the Davos people and all of that sort of thing. And that almost, I mean, you could still argue that that's winning out right now, but like that almost flew completely under the radar. So the idea that like, just people's preferences and tastes, I like Coke better than I like Pepsi or something, is going to, undo this whole thing. I think is, sorry to say, a little naive.
Well, I want to jump in real quick and pull up a comment from Silly Automatic here that I think is an interesting point. He says, I might trust AI over my doctor because AI doesn't get money from Big Pharma and doesn't care if I come back every 6 months. My contention is it will be paid by Big Pharma. It will be built by Big Pharma. That's like, if there's medical AI systems, they are going to be funded to be like, someone has to pay for the data center. And the people that are going to pay for the data center are going to be the big hospital systems and or the like pharmaceutical companies that already are paying doctors. So the idea that they're not, like, an AI is not going to be influenced by like corporate interests is just not going to happen.
And that's one of the key questions here, is that it's how much people trust and how the trust is increasing with AI. They enter in a prompt, and whatever answer they get, pretty much, okay, that must be the truth. Well, it's not necessarily the truth, because these things can and are manipulated. And so if people are depending on AI, especially LLMs, to tell them what is true and what is false, we're conditioned to just believe it. And so that's very dangerous in itself.
I think I think the problems for these people whose romantic partners have gone a bit mad through AI is emblematic of what this discussion is really about. It's about externalities. It's about the effects on other people of people's use of AI. And that is something that is a legitimate space for government to operate in. So the discussion between Donald and Chris, I thought was quite essential here, which is that we really need to get to it. When is it externalities, and when is it just the effect of a product that people are buying by choice? If it's the latter, to the extent that it's the latter, Chris's points are, I think, 100% right. To the extent that it's the former, that there are externalities and there are effects on other people, then Donald is correct that somebody needs to step in, or we as human beings need someone to step in.
Just one last comment on the AI doctor thing. So, you go to a doctor, the doctor has a waiting room full of people. They come in, they're like, what's your name? Linnea, right? Oh yeah, it's Linnea. Let me look at your chart for 5 seconds. What's the issue? It's this. All right, yeah, we'll give you some pills for that. All right, see you later. I got another doctor or another patient to go see. Whereas artificial intelligence could theoretically know your charts inside and out, be able to absorb every bit of information that you're giving it when it comes to the symptoms that you're experiencing, be able to cross-reference that with maybe even like your family records or the area in which you live, environmental records, and be able to give you like a very thorough diagnosis. So I think we're definitely going to get to a point where people trust the AI option over the human.
But did the AI take the Hippocratic Oath? No, it didn't. So what if the AI is embedded with programming that says the real thing is we want to cut costs, versus the doctor saying the real thing is I want to make sure that you are healed. So that's where I trust a human more than I trust a machine, and I will always trust a human more than I trust a machine.
I mean, I don't want to dwell on this for too long.
2 times 2 is 5. 2 times 2 is 5. Don't trust the calculator.
I would say sometimes that just think about like what Canada would do with an automated. They already basically do have an automated system like this up there, right? And one of the major complaints about like what Obamacare did to the medical system was it turned everybody into a checklist.
Yeah.
So I think there is very good potential for like an AI medical assistant being a very, very good thing for exactly the reason why Donald said. However, Chris is also correct in that there's a very good chance that this stuff is not going to be used for the betterment of the human person, and rather for the betterment of whatever like economic system it's serving or whatever it happens to be. Okay, we're gonna move on to people outsourcing their brains to GPT, not just for like romance, as weird as that last segment was, and for being some kind of AI prophet. But anyway, so this is something that came across my feed the other day, posted by William Briggs, who is a statistician. He's been talking about this quite a bit recently. This is an article from the Chronicle of Higher Education. I'm going to read it at length here because it really is interesting. So and this is all you, Chris, so get ready. So is AI enhancing education or replacing it? Technology should facilitate learning, not substitute it. All right, so I cannot talk today. Generative AI can be useful for learning. These tools are good at creating explanations for difficult concepts, practice quizzes, study guides, and so on. Students can write a paper and ask for feedback on diction, or see what a rewrite at various reading levels would look like, or request a summary to check if their meaning is clear. Engaged uses have been visible since ChatGPT launched, side by side with the lazy ones. The fact that AI might help students learn is no guarantee that it will help them learn. I have spent much of the last 2 years talking with professors and students to try to understand what is going on in their classrooms. In these conversations, faculty have been variously vexed, curious, angry, or excited. But as of the last year was winding down, for the first time, one of the frequently expressed emotions was sadness. We are also hearing a growing sense of sadness from the students about AI use. Some observations collected were, I've become lazier, AI makes reading easier, but it slowly causes my brain to lose the ability to think critically or understand every word. I feel like I rely too much on AI and it is taking creativity away from me. On using AI summaries, someone says, sometimes I don't even understand what the text is trying to tell me, and sometimes it's too much text in a short period of time, and sometimes I'm just not interested in it. Yeah, it's helpful, but I'm scared that someday we'll prefer to read only AI summaries rather than our own, and we'll become very dependent on it. So our problem is that we have two problems, says this educator. One is we not have to encourage our students to adopt creative and helpful uses of AI. The other is figuring out how to discourage them from adopting lazy and harmful uses. Those are both important. The second, emphasize to the audience here, because I've seen this a lot, that people will say like, this is, Gen Z, Gen Alpha, millennials are just lazy. So that's their problem. They don't want to learn, blah, blah, blah. But this is everyone problem, hence the title of this week's episode, because we are continuously seeing on Twitter, like, people across all generations outsourcing even like opinions to Grok, saying like, someone says, man, I really think pancakes are great. And someone says, Grok, is this true? I don't know. Are they? That's a you question. That's something only you can answer. Grok cannot answer that for you. So people across the board are outsourcing their thinking to AI. So, Chris, when it comes to students doing this, I really do think that it's true that if you are using LLMs to like write papers for you or something all the time, you're just not absorbing the information, because as part of this article also talks about learning, like the homework assignments and the essays and stuff are worthless, except in that they are part of the process of learning things. Like the output itself isn't what education is supposed to be about. It's about the process of doing it.
It's about the process of critical thinking. And when I was in high schools and in doing social studies courses, and a lot of it was reading and writing, I was shocked at the time at how poor the writing samples were that I would receive from juniors, seniors, sophomores, and even freshmen. And I strongly believe that in the years that I've been out of the public school system, it's gotten far worse. And I think a big part of it is because students are now relying on these LLMs to produce essays and things that they did not actually produce themselves, obviously. So what they're doing is they're shortchanging themselves, because eventually at some point in some time, you are going to have to demonstrate those critical thinking skills, those organizational skills, those communication skills. And if you were always just relying on ChatGPT or some other LLM to do that thinking, quote unquote, thinking for you, well, then your brain is not going to be able to exercise, those muscles. And I think we are seeing that across the board. I think we're seeing that not only in the writing or lack thereof, that's happening in high schools and college campuses across this nation, but we're seeing it because many of the young people that I interact with, they are lacking those fundamental skills of how to voice, their opinions in a, articulate manner. And I think a lot of that is because they have just become so dependent on these technologies to, quote, do their thinking for them. And they are not capable of engaging in that deep level of thinking things from multiple perspectives, putting yourself in other people's shoes, try to think about it from their point of view and all that kind of stuff. So I think this is going to have long-term, big-time consequences when you've got a whole generation of people who grow up and cannot actually communicate effectively and use their analytical thinking skills and engage in, objective truth seeking.
Yeah, Donnie.
I'm split when it comes to this topic, because one thing that I want to make clear, I think people that have kind of listened to the show long enough know that I am not like an anti artificial intelligence person. I think it's inevitable. I think the best thing that we can do is try to figure out healthy ways to incorporate it into our lives, and be, cautious about ways that could negatively impact individual liberty and personal autonomy. So when it comes to artificial intelligence as it relates to the classroom, I can wax poetically about how this could be extremely helpful for students. And the idea that, I've read some science fiction books where every student has their own personal AI teaching assistant sort of person. And this teaching assistant is able to help that student personally and understand how that student learns differently than any other student. And especially like what type of learning process that student needs, and be able to facilitate that with unwavering attention because it's only focused on that one person. That's the sort of stuff that artificial intelligence can allow. On the other side of things, I think Chris is absolutely right. That idea that if you don't use it, you lose it. And one of the examples that I talk about is I have a bad habit of I've had this for a decade now, of relying on Google Maps to get me to wherever I need to go, even to and from work, even though I drive that all the time. And it's every once in a while there's a traffic jam and it'll reroute me before I even see the traffic. So I use it all of the time. But in certain instances where my phone's not charged or something, or maybe I didn't turn the map on, it's just like, wait, do I do I turn left here? Because I haven't had to use that. I haven't had to use that. Like, I have a computer telling me which way to go. So extrapolating that out to all of this sort of thing, where you literally are using it to do your thinking, definitely is going to have negative effects. If you're using it as a tool to more effectively get your ideas across, there could be some benefits there. So I am split on this, and the way that I see our current education system going, and the lack of kind of that one-on-one attention and concern about test scores at all. I do think that this sort of stuff will be abused by students. And after COVID and everything that Chris described, we're going to be spitting out adults into the workforce that have no honed skills when it comes to critical thinking. That is definitely a large concern of mine.
Yeah, and I think I do encourage people to read that whole article. It's very interesting. I think we'll try to put it in the description or something. But it's basically like these teachers, the particular educator who wrote the article is someone who has been trying to get ahead of it and like incorporate AI into their teaching stuff and into like student assignments and whatnot. And what they're finding basically is that there's like two types of uses, and nobody uses just one type of use or the other. And the two types would be active, thoughtful use of AI as a tool and lazy use of AI. And they found that most students are doing a blend of both. Like on certain assignments, they're using it as a tool. And on certain other assignments, like if they start feeling like buried in work or something in homework, and I do think that there's too much homework generally, but that's, Chris probably disagrees with me, but I don't know. They will revert to the lazy use and outsource all of their thinking to it because they're like, well, I don't have time for this. Here, ChatGPT will do it in 2 seconds. And I can empathize with that, thought process. I'm not like, you can't blame them for using it that way. So there has to be something that can be done about encouraging the active use rather than the like passive.
Yeah, I think that's a wonderful distinction. And I think that the education system needs to do more to try to stifle that lazy use and encourage that, what was the other term that you used? The not lazy, but like a productive, active use. Encourage that, because again, AI is not going anywhere. We would be doing ourselves a disservice if we were to be like, shut it down, John Connor style, blow up the mainframes. We have to do it, but we have to train ourselves to use it properly. And it's like, I wish we had this kind of ability to go back in time when it comes to social media, where it's like there are very healthy ways that you could use social media, and there's very negative ways. And if we were aware of those things on the onset of that, maybe we could have negated some of those negative ways, before it got crazy.
Well, but what's happening now is that there finally is a conversation happening across society where people are saying, hey, maybe we just did go too much into the social media world, without hesitation, without thinking about the long-term costs. And I would hope that at the beginning of the AI revolution, that we have this very much needed societal dialogue as well, because just going back to the education thing for a second, I remember when I was in high school, when I was not teaching, but when I was in high school, one of the teachers, he just told me, he goes, you just want me to spoon feed you the answer. And he was right. I wanted him to spoon feed me the answer because I didn't want to actually go do the research, look it up and do all that stuff, because that takes time and that takes effort. AI makes spoon feeding answers so much easier. It's not even funny. And it makes it almost impossible for the teacher to detect whether or not the student had been spoon fed the answer from AI or whether they actually came up with that on their own volition. And that to me is the one of the biggest problems here, is that we're going to have an entire generation who just takes the lazy approach and just says, spoon feed me the answer, when of course you cannot be spoon fed an answer, because there is no ultimate answer to anything. It's a constant process of taking in data and evidence and analyzing it, and fine tuning your opinion, your analysis, and your assessment of the thing. So to just put a prompt into AI and just say AI spits out the answer, and you just take that without any sort of criticism, I just feel is just very, very strange.
one of the real problems here with AI's use and abuse is that it's free and immediate. Like I like steak, right? I like good food, and I especially love steaks. It would be pretty expensive for me to eat steak once a week if I always went out to a steakhouse for that. It's a lot more affordable to just buy a steak at the grocery store and then cook it here at home. I can make it just as good as I can get at a steakhouse. But so I've learned how to cook, not just steaks, but I've learned how to bake. I think I'm a pretty good cook. As a matter of fact, I make a fantastic French style omelet. These are things I've learned how to do because I want that quality food in my life. Because to get that good food, I'd have to go outside. It's inconvenient. And of course, it's also expensive. AI is literally at everybody's fingertips. It costs nothing. There are some pro accounts, but they basically costs you zero money. And the result is instantaneous. That is a very, very hard drug to avoid getting addicted to if you're a student.
Yeah. It's important to note that we do have choices here. The fact that education is controlled by government is what's going to determine how education responds to AI. For example, people used to be very educated, and they didn't even have cell phones. They didn't have computers. They didn't have AI. They just had these things called books.
Yeah.
And what you would do is you would read the book, and then the teacher would tell you, would sort of, ask you questions about what the book is about. And then you would all kind of know the book a little bit better. And then the teacher would ask you questions in class on a piece of paper or on the chalkboard saying, so when this character did this, what were they thinking? What were they trying to accomplish? And you would write it down on a piece of paper. All of that could continue. We could, or could be resumed. We could bring all that back. The chances are that we won't, because not of the laziness of the children, but of the laziness, and I think Chris will speak to this, of the teachers and the teacher and which is encouraged by the teachers unions, and the laziness of administrators, and the laziness of the people who run the system, and of the children's parents, because they would rather have their kids, many would rather have their kids go to a chat GTP and get the answer than ask them about it. I remember toiling along with my children on the insane math problems that I hadn't dealt with for 20 years or 15 years. And it's like, holy cow, this is tough. But that's the point, is hard work is the way to make yourself better. And we could ask that of children, or we could just say, well, it's easier for us if the kids come out of here ignorant. That's what we've been doing for the last 40 to 50 years. So it's always a choice. We have a choice. We can make it however we want. Chances are good that we will take the most self-indulgent and foolish path.
Well, but the point of education is for the student to not only learn about the world, but learn about themselves and learn about what their skills are and their talents are. And if you're just constantly just being spoon-fed the answer from an AI program, they're not having to understand, hey, wait a second, when it comes to analytical, thinking, maybe I'm not the greatest, but when it comes to art and creativity, I'm much better at that. So I think that this is also just, the dumbing down of everybody. And what it's going to do is it's just going to perpetuate this myth that most American students should go right to college, get a 4-year degree, and work in some sort of, some field in which they're, going to be using their brains, when that's not necessarily the case. We have a huge shortage of blue collar workers in a lot of the trades right now. And a lot of that, I think, is connected, obviously, to our education system trying to funnel so many students into higher education when they don't necessarily need to be there. And I think that AI is just perpetuating that by making these students appear smarter than they are, and their essays, seem better than they are, which is not really doing them any long-term good, but it might give them a short-term boost in terms of their class rank, or getting into a college or whatever.
Yeah. This and transitioning from here into the economics issues that we're heading towards, not just, take all of this, what we just talked about, with a bunch of people entering the workforce who are less able to think for themselves potentially. And then think about this. AI is coming for the laptop and programming class, which is not what people were talking about years ago. But so from the entrepreneur, are we all doomed? The CEO of Fiverr says AI is definitely taking your job. Here's what to do about it. A McKinsey report predicts that by 2030, AI could automate 30% of US work. A Goldman Sachs report found that AI could eliminate 300 million jobs globally and automate 2/3 of work in the US and Europe. Now, the CEO of one of the biggest freelancing marketplaces, Fiverr, says that it doesn't matter what profession you choose, AI is coming for your job. It does not matter if you are a programmer, designer, product manager, data scientist, lawyer, customer support representative, salesperson, or a finance person. AI is coming for you. CEO of Fiverr, Micah Kaufman, wrote in an internal email sent last month that warned the company's 775 employees about AI's potential to replace their jobs. And he basically told them, like, even my job as CEO is going to be threatened by this. So this is something that conservative politicians really need to be aware of and ready for, right? I mean, it's not that it's not going to happen unless we were to do something like, say, actually, company, you're not allowed to, step in that way and say, actually, company, you're not allowed to replace all of your workers with robots. I don't know. Donald, what's your thought on this?
Yeah, well, this was particularly alarming, considering the whole concept of Fiverr is based on this idea of freelance, and the head of it is being like, all of these content creators that you're getting paid, $5, $10, $50 for these little one-off things, all of that's going to be threatened. So it's like a warning coming from this guy should carry extra weight. This ties directly to the thing that we were talking about with one of the poll questions with UBI. It's like, if we really are staring down the barrel of something like this, like, we have to have some ideas out there, because it hasn't happened yet. Unemployment rate's still really good, but like, if we were to get to like a systematic level, even if it's like 7%, 10% or something like that, and it's a lot of these like like laptop jobs or whatever you referred to it as, that we don't need as many people doing these things anymore because we got AI doing it. Who are those people going to gravitate towards when you've got someone else on the other side of the political aisle that's selling them this supposed solution of a UBI? It just feels like we're kind of just like, we don't even want to pick up the sword to go into battle of this idea because we're against it. But yeah, so that warning, I saw that, I think I shared that with you all like last week or something, but I thought it was particularly noteworthy as it pertains to this certain facet.
Well, we have to bear in mind that the population is aging. And so we will not have as big of a workforce going forward as we do now. And in fact, it has been declining, the percentage of the people of working age who are actually working. What happened, especially starting in the 1980s, when taxes were reduced, by the way, federal taxes, is that women really started to enter the workforce in large quantities. So we had an expanding workforce and expanding economy. Now, if you have a decreasing workforce, then there is some decreasing pool for your workforce, that is, then there is some room for AI to alleviate some of those problems. What's going to happen in all these cases is always, as things move forward, people will adjust. They'll make some bad adjustments, and then they'll make some better adjustments down the road. So I don't think it's quite clear exactly what the effects of AI will be on the job market, but I do think it's quite clear that a universal basic income is an absurdly dumb approach to whatever you perceive as the problem. Solve the direct problems, if any, but don't change everything you do just in order to fix something that could be fixed other ways.
Sam, you bring up a very interesting point about the fact that so many women have had to enter the workforce since, the 1970s in particular. And what that done has, reaped destruction upon the family. You think of all these mothers who are in the workforce and they can't, take care of their children. They can't take care of their homes. So maybe AI will allow those women to have much more of a work-life balance where they can be at home and stay with their kids. And so there's so many like things that we don't know that could happen, so many possible benefits that could happen, just making the job environment more efficient, less mundane for people. It could open up all new avenues that we haven't even thought of yet. So I'm just I don't want to sit here and say, AI is going to make 80% of the workforce, or 50 or 40, whatever, like not needed anymore, because I don't think that that's true. And that they've said that time and again when automobiles were first invented, when computers first came of age, when the loom first came in. It's like, oh no, all the people who make clothing and textiles, what are they going to do? Like Sam said, we as humans have a amazing, ability to adapt to our circumstances. And I feel that even with AI, it's not going to be this, this terrible dystopian, future that some people want you to believe that it's going to be, when for all we know, it could be, it could actually unlock whole new opportunities that we can't even fathom right now.
But there's an idea of hope for the best and plan for the worst, right? So, it's true. These things were said before. I actually talked about this 4 episodes ago when I did the 5 things conservatives need to understand about AI. And that's the idea that, yes, these changes have happened in the past. This time it's happening so much faster. Like there was literally a meme like 3 years ago that's like, oh, sorry that you don't have your fossil fuel job or whatever. Learn to code. That was like 3 years ago. Now coding, if you got into coding, good luck, because robots are doing better than you're ever going to be able to do when it comes to that. So it's happening at a much faster pace. And yes, we could be hopeful that it is similar and that this is going to just unlock new things. And we're never going to see high unemployment as a result of this. But the idea that we're not going to plan for that potential, again, I think is doing our side a disservice.
Yeah,
well,
I mean,
if you have been coding, learn to dig up fossil fuels.
there you go. Linnea will endorse that for sure.
Actually, so if my job here at the Heartland Institute gets replaced with AI, what I'm going to do is I'm going to have ChatGPT write me a resume for how to be a Blade Runner in the future apocalypse, and I will be finding replicants and I will be destroying them. So
let me. Can I just make one more quick point on this before we run off? Yeah. So actually, from that piece that Micah Kaufman had written for his employees, he says that he makes some really, I think, really good point here. And it's like he says that the easy tasks will no longer exist. This is what AI is going to do. Easy tasks will no longer exist. The hard tasks will become the new easy, and then the impossible tasks will be the new hard. And he says, quote, "If you do not become an exceptional talent at what you do, a master, you will face the need for a career change in months, not years, in months." And what's his advice? To use AI, to get into using AI smartly. And we're actually very blessed. Andy, our producer, has dove headfirst into AI. I think he's covered in bits of code every day. He has to wash it out of his hair. He's so much into AI. And it's been doing great things for the Heartland Institute, especially for these programs that you have, these streams. But as we talked about earlier in this podcast, especially when it came to students, right? There's the way to use AI to do all the work for you, the dumb way. And then there's the smart way to use AI, which is to use it to increase your productivity and your creativity, basically using it as a tool to supplement your own intelligence and instincts and judgment and creativity. And that's the future that Micah Kaufman here is talking about. And the people who can do that will be the ones who succeed. And the people who are using ChatGPT and other generative AIs to do the work for them because they're too lazy, those are the people that are going to be left behind.
Yeah, I just want to point out one thing. We're coming up on an hour and a half, but this is such a good topic. I feel like it's worth it. But, there is a bottleneck for AI, and that is energy. We thought it was bad when energy demand because of electrification was going to be a major issue, right? We all, we're looking at, as we said earlier, down the barrel of blackouts and stuff in California because of electric cars and electric appliances across the board. And so we were worried about that. But so David Holt at Real Clear Energy kind of breaks down what exactly we're looking at when it comes to energy demand from the AI stuff. It's like crazy. Okay, I'm going to read it to you real quick. Okay, multiple analyses predict US electricity demand will surge by 35 to 50% between now and 2040. I actually think that might be a little bit conservative. So with much of that growth concentrated in the next decade, we're looking at annual growth rates approaching 3%, levels not seen since the 1980s. By some estimates, we'll need to add 128 gigawatts of new electricity capacity in the next 5 years. That's like building power for 13 cities the size of New York overnight. AI isn't just energy intensive, it is essentially energy transformed. Each ChatGPT query consumes roughly 10 times the energy of a standard Google search. The computing centers powering the AI revolution need enormous quantities of electricity that's available 24/7 without interruption. China understands this connection perfectly. They're rapidly expanding their energy infrastructure, including coal, natural gas, nuclear, and renewables, to fuel their AI ambitions. And this is something I've definitely wanted to touch on at least a little bit today, which is the fact that China is going to try to beat us in this area. And that would be a catastrophe, considering the power that this technology has. Guys, I think that one, electricity is going to be the bottleneck for AI expansion. And that's part of the reason why I think a lot of these groups like BlackRock and them have all of a sudden started talking less positively about wind and solar and have been talking very positively about nuclear and even about gas in some cases. It's because they know that this particular industry cannot survive with wind and solar.
Yes. Yeah, you're absolutely right on everything that you're saying there. Is it Treasury Secretary Scott Bessent? Is that correct? Right. Okay, nodding heads. He was at some conference or something. He was in front of a microphone and he said, basically, I've been saying this for a little while now, but I'm going to say it again. That the United States winning the AI and quantum race is the most important thing, and there's it's nothing else is on that level. And I think that's absolutely right. And the idea that energy is going to be a bottleneck is absolutely the case. We've played videos on this podcast before of Mark Zuckerberg saying that exact thing, almost word for word. He thought that compute was going to be the bottleneck, but then he realized that we have plenty of compute. It's going to be energy. And the thing that I will never forget, and I will remind everybody to the end of time, or until the end of this, becomes relevant, is Larry Fink of BlackRock going in Davos, basically saying that renewable energy cannot do the heavy lifting that we need when it comes to the energy demand of the near future, based on all of this AI technology. You would never dream of those sentences to be said a year and a half ago. You'd never think that Larry Fink would go to Davos and run down renewable energy. You would never imagine that. And yet this is where we're at. And I do think that the climate change alarmism pushing of all this solar and wind is running out of steam. No pun intended. Because the reality is there's no way that you're going to the climate realism show that you guys all do Fridays at noon Central Time on all of these channels. Nice little plug there. There's part of the intro is the idea that I think it's Sterling saying you can't power a modern society on renewable energy. That's true. And it's even more true that you're not going to be able to power the society of the future on it. It's impossible. So yeah, you're absolutely right in everything you were saying, Linnea.
Hooray.
I have some good news for you in this regard. Economists of the free market and Austrian variety have long made the point, especially supply-siders, which is that scarcity creates abundance. And how does it do that? When things are scarce, people think up ways of getting them in less expensive ways, because when things get scarce, they get expensive. And so in order to do more efficient work, you simply try other things. People have noticed, for example, or pointed out that the human brain doesn't create much heat, although it probably goes out through the blood system, but it doesn't create much heat because the transfer of information is done by chemical means. So obviously, we don't want people using other people's human brains for their computers, like in science fiction or something. Maybe we'll use fish brains. If you use a lot of fish, you could probably
do fish have brains?
Yeah, right. I'm jesting there, but the point is that there are chemical ways of transferring information that have barely been explored. And why haven't they been explored? Because there was no need to. If the need arises, people will find ways, life will get better, the things that have become scarce will become abundant by other means. So again, people will adjust, we will get through this, and there's always a transition period, as President Trump said about trade, but the reality is that things just end up better and better as long as we don't have massive organizations controlling everything.
Yeah, now you've got me imagining a giant like Siberium of brains linked together to power something. Is just a terrible thing. Different than the Matrix, but similar. Anyway, so well, I think unless somebody has something more to add to what we've been talking about, that's kind of our like highlight of the end of the show, saying like, look, there is a bottleneck here. It's not going to just explode without some pretty significant infrastructure investment that up to now, a lot of the powers that be were pretty opposed to, but they're going to have to shift their tune if they want their AI revolution to go forward.
Well, just on that, just one very, very quick point. So Donald Trump was in Qatar yesterday, and he was in Saudi Arabia the day before. And what did he just announce? Over $2 trillion of AI investments that those two nations are going to bring to the United States. So this idea that we're going to be able to lead the AI race, given the limitations of solar and wind, I think that cat is out of the bag. I think that most Americans are well aware that the solar and wind fad is well over, and they want affordable, reliable, and dependable energy. And that's one thing that the Heartland Institute has been, advocating for 40 years now, and we will continue to do that.
Yeah, I actually had notes in here. I know the wrap-up music is playing, but I had notes in my, before I came on the show here, talking specifically about the Saudi Arabia deal, the Qatar deal, some of these past deals with the United Arab Emirates, and apparently that's where Trump is headed to today. But all of those meetings, Sam Altman was there, the head of NVIDIA was there, some of these other big tech people were there. A lot of this has to do with artificial intelligence. I think that there is a kind of a macro geopolitical thing going on kind of below the surface level where it's competing for that area of the world when it comes to artificial intelligence. We're trying to export our influence when it comes to AI to there and trying to prevent China from getting their meat hooks into that part of the world. So there's a huge story developing when it comes to that you're not going to see on just the front lines of Fox News or anything.
Yeah, absolutely.
We could talk about that in a future episode.
I know, we're going to have you back again to talk about that specifically, I believe, because I'm sure you're right, and things are moving very quickly, and they should be. And in fact, the Pope chose his name because it is the name of a previous Pope who was at the beginning of the Industrial Revolution.
That's
and
right.
So things are coming together, you guys.
That's why we had the white smoke at the beginning of the episode. It wasn't an accident. We did that on purpose.
Right, exactly. No, it wasn't a whoops. That was on purpose. Good job, team. Okay, anyway, so thank you guys all for being here. Thank you, Donnie, for coming in. Do you guys have anything to pitch? I'll go around the circle here. Jim?
Just follow me on X at @JLakely. Follow the Heartland Institute on X at Heartland Inst. And always visit heartland.org.
Chris?
Yeah, so we've got some great new polls out, and if you go to heartland.org, they should be on the front page, and you can see and you can get all the crosstabs, and it's very interesting stuff.
All right, Donnie?
Yeah, just echoing everything that Jim and Chris said. When it comes to articles that I'm producing, I am producing those regularly now. Most of them are being posted over at The Blaze. So if you Google The Blaze and my name, you'll see a page that's got all of my recent articles up there, some of them pertaining to conversations that we had during this episode. So check that out.
Yes, absolutely. Please do, you guys. And Sam?
Yeah, check me out at @stkarnick and, of course, stkarnick.substack.com. Thank you very much.
Alrighty. Thanks, everyone. That's all the time we have. We are live every single week, Thursdays, noon Central, on Rumble, Twitter, YouTube, Facebook, all over the place. For audio listeners, please rate us well on whatever service you're using. Leave a review. Thank you so much. We will see you guys all again next week.